welcome you to this IEP Tips to Equip video series on the Independent Educational Evaluation, or IEE. In part one of the series, we already discussed the definition of an IEE and how to begin the process. Now we're going to be looking at part two of the series, which is once the district gets the parent's request for an independent educational evaluation at public expense, what are their two legal options for responding to that request? So let's begin. IEP quick tip number 2. In response to an IEE, the district only has two choices. Without unnecessary delay, either agree to fund the IEE or file for due process to defend its evaluation. To agree to fund the IEE simply means that the district agrees to pay for the parent's request for an independent evaluation. Now, the second option, filing for due process to defend its evaluation, means that the school district files a due process complaint against the parent and argues to a judge that its evaluation was appropriate. If it can prove that its evaluation was appropriate, the judge will likely deny the parent's request for an IEE at public expense. If it fails to prove its evaluation was appropriate, it's likely that the judge will award the parent the IEE at public expense. So there are only two options available: agree to fund or file for due process. And I think where school districts get tripped up is they don't follow one of these two available options. And if they really don't want to pay for the parent's IEE, they have to file for due process. And I've seen them do other things than filing for due process. For example, writing a letter to the parent saying, no, we disagree with your request. We're not going to fund your IEE. That is not filing for due process. Or they write a letter to the parent and they say, okay, you don't like our evaluation, we'll reevaluate. Well, that too is not filing for due process. Or maybe they ignore the parent's request altogether. Well, that's not filing for due process. And the problem with those options I've just mentioned is the law requires the district to file for due process without unnecessary delay. So if they write these letters to the parent and maybe the parent ignores the letters, time has been ticking on. And it may be that too much time has passed, even if they decide to file for due process at some later date, where a judge might say, there was unnecessary delay in the filing for due process, so I'm going to grant the parent's request for an IEE at public expense, even if the district's evaluation was appropriate. Now, the law doesn't define without unnecessary delay. It might be jurisdictional based on case law. In some jurisdictions, it might be more than 3 months. In others, it might be more than 6 months. But the point being that if the district wants to challenge the parent's request for an IEE, they should carefully consider the evaluations at issue, decide whether they're appropriate substantively and procedurally. And if they decide after considering their evaluations that it's worth the trouble and expense to file for due process, then they should do so quickly. You don't want to be in a situation where you've created an unnecessary delay and the judge rules against you simply on that basis alone. Well, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be releasing quick tip number 3. And in that quick tip, we're going to describe the district's obligation to consider the parent's outside information, or IEE, at an IEP team meeting. Sign up for our newsletter at iepsolution.com, and we'll keep you up to date with part 3 of this IEP Tips to Equip webinar, as well as our upcoming live webinars and boot camps, where we'll delve into important special education topics in much greater detail. Thank you for watching this IEP Tips to Equip webinar.